To me, I don't think it's a huge story. I don't think it changes anybody's votes
No, it doesn't.
that Joe Biden went on after primetime. It doesn't. But I do think it speaks to how awkward Monday night was.
Yeah, it's awkward because they stabbed him in the back in real time, okay? He was out there eulogizing himself. And they bumped him. It's like they bumped the main act so nobody would see it. It's like a bunch of Democrats who just beat the crap out of their spouse. Just domestic violence, battered the hell out of Joe to the point that he's basically dead. Like, get out! Your entire 40, 50 years in government is now dead to us.
Nobody is questioning the fact that the Democratic Party seems much better positioned right now than it did 4 weeks and 2 days ago. There's no question about that. Former Speaker Pelosi...
So why are we even talking about it?
They put it on my script and made me read it. They're holding my cat hostage.
Oh my gosh. CBS reporting, as the night was unfolding ahead of us, that it appears Biden is going to get knocked out of primetime by DNC programming. And we were watching this. We were waiting for him to come out. In fact, in the after party on the show yesterday, we were trying to decide how long his speech was going to be. But the other angle that we were considering was whether he was going to be on time or not. And we thought he was going to come out, I think, 9:50 Central Time. He was, I think, 30, 45 minutes late. You know, he just kept going on, and they kept bringing out speakers. And there were a bunch of people that were ahead of him, and then they booted some of the people to get him, on earlier. But it was not good, okay? Everybody noticed this. This was Nate Silver. He is formerly a big favorite of the left. Now they're sort of unhappy with him because he's pointing stuff out like this. But here is Clara Jeffrey. Last night on X, there was a whole thing going on right now where there was a big debate about this. Why are they delaying Joe? Why do they not want people to see him? This is the president. This is his night. Like, they're just talking about abortion. We have another speaker about abortion and abortion and abortion. Good Lord. Like, it's the president. We already know he's not good when it comes late at night. So what are they doing? Anyways, so this woman, Clara Jeffrey, she says, well, I would like to remind members of the East Coast media that more than half of all Americans, including those in Chicago, don't live in your time zone. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm sitting here and going like, bro, I'm tired. It's like 8:30. I'm like, I'm getting ready for bed, man. Joe's going to come out. And I think he started speaking at like past 9 o'clock my time. Or no, when was it? I don't even know. But I'm like, it's late. Where is this dude, right? He should have been speaking sometime like maybe 7 our time, but they put him way late. Anyways, so he says, look, the media is very East Coast focused though, but you've got to be pretty naive to think the prolonged DNC tonight is for any reason other than diminishing Biden's visibility. He spoke at 10:30 Central, so that was about, 8:30 my time? That's right. It went into like 9 o'clock, and I was like, gosh, this is late. So 10:30, so it's like 11:30 East Coast, right? So like everybody's in bed, right? This is not even a close call, okay? Give me a break. And I felt the same way. A lot of people did. Like, how pilled do you have to be, he says, to think that it's just a coincidence that the president of the United States doesn't speak until so late? It's just a coincidence. Oops, our schedule got busy. Sorry, there was raucous applause. All right, that was the DNC's excuse on this. Britt Hume came out and he had a good point. He says, it really says a lot about the Democratic Party that it would not ask its abortion speakers to just wait a little bit so that their president could speak at a reasonable hour on a night that's supposedly devoted to him. It's late, man. And that was all by design. Now, the DNC came out and they said, well, because of the raucous applause interrupting speaker after speaker, because we were just so excited, we ultimately skipped elements of our program to ensure we could get to President Biden as quickly as possible so that he could speak directly to the American people. We're proud of the electric atmosphere in our convention hall and proud that our convention is showcasing the broad and diverse coalition behind Harris walls throughout the week on and off the stage. It's like, wow, interesting. So that's why they pushed it back so late. And they were also talking about this on the media. This guy, right, no MAGA Trumper. He's Chris Cillizza. I think he was formerly, some of the one big magazine or whatever. But here's what he said too. He says, the fact that Biden went on at 11:30 p.m. was a major screw up. Okay, the only thing you have to do here is honor Biden, make sure they tell Kamala's story. They tried to do both at once and it got weird. And so here's this guy.
They went on way too long. And you got to plan better, right? You got to plan better. If you want to honor the current president of the United States, you got to plan better. You can't have him go on at 11:26 p.m. So to me, I don't think it's a huge story. I don't think it changes anybody's votes that Joe Biden went on after primetime. It doesn't. But I do think it speaks to how awkward Monday night was.
Yeah, it's awkward because they stabbed him in the back in real time, okay? He was out there eulogizing himself. And they bumped him. It's like they bumped the main act so nobody would see it. So here's Joe Biden. Now, he was also a couple moments where he got off script here. Bill Hemmer from Fox pointed these out. And I caught definitely that first one where he was talking about those protesters having a point. And we'll see if they take that to heed today.
Two bit of news here. You may not have been able to catch it from from watching this speech. He ad-libbed two lines that I think made news. Number one, those protesters outside have a point. And then he went on to say on both sides, he ad-libbed that line. And then he said toward the end, he said, all that talk that I was angry to step down, it's not true. That was not in the prompter either.
It's not true. And he got a little bit off keister there a few times during the day, and he was very angry. And there was an interesting conspiracy theory I saw actually from Clay Travis on X. He was saying, you know, one of his conspiracy theories was maybe they didn't actually give Joe the real shot back during the debate, you know, the booster shot that gives him that adrenaline or whatever this is, as we'll watch. But that could be curious, you know, oh yeah, just go pump him up full of his magic sauce. And they go, yeah, here you go. It's just a little placebo. Nothing. He walks out and slurs all over himself for 2.5 hours or whatever that was, 2 hours. And kind of interesting to take him out. But he was pumped up last night with rage. And here's a little bit. He's talking about these protesters with the genocide. Here's his ad lib.
The civilian suffering of the Palestinian people, and finally deliver a ceasefire and end this war. Those protesters out in the street, they have a point. A lot of innocent people are being killed on both sides.
Whoa, on both sides. Really? All right. So that's going to leave a mark. I'm sure we'll see some more about that if we do. I'm sure it'll be on the streets outside of the DNC. Now, here's Joe again. He also got a little bit lost in one of his segments.
That's not hyperbole. It's because Medicare no longer has to pay those exorbitant prices to the big pharma. But look, thank you, Kamala, too.
He got pretty confused a bunch last night. It was terrible. I mean, the performance when he came out, he was slurring all over himself. I was listening going, oh my gosh, what the hell did he just say? And he was doing the old familiar Biden routine where he said, not a joke. If you were playing a drinking game at home and you had not a joke on your drinking game, you're done. You're absolutely smashed, hammered, worse than Kamala, probably. Worse than Nancy Pelosi, somewhere in between them. Hammered, because he said it a lot. Not a joke, repeatedly. And here's more. He also got fact-checked. Shout out to Bonnie. Bonnie flagged this for us over on X this morning. Now, one of the more egregious things that we saw also was the Fine People hoax. It's amazing they keep dragging this out. It's already been disproven. Okay, it was disproven largely by the right long time ago. Scott Adams has done a lot of banging the table on that one for years, which is very important, I think, in breaking through the noise. We also saw very recently Snopes came out and also confirmed this. Oh, suddenly, oh yeah, it was a hoax after 7 years of talking about it. So Joe Biden made that the entire basis of his run for the White House and then brought it up again, right? The guy's just a liar through and through. Lied to start his campaign on the Fine People hoax and is lying to end his political career with the Fine People hoax. The dude's a liar, a plagiarist, a criminal, and so it's just perfectly fitting. Here's some more fact checks from CNN.
Let's bring in CNN senior reporter Daniel Dale for a fact check of tonight's speeches. Daniel, I guess let's start with the president. What did you make of it?
There were certainly some false or misleading claims there, especially on the subject of the economy. I want you to listen to something he said on the subject of U.S. imports and exports.
We used to import products and export jobs. Now we export American products and create American jobs right here in America, where jobs belong.
This claim is misleading, Jake. U.S. exports of goods have increased under President Biden. So far, so good with that claim. But contrary to the other part of that claim, we are still importing a whole lot of stuff, too. What he didn't mention is that U.S. imports have increased during his presidency. Increased, not decreased. In fact, increased by more than exports have increased. So, therefore, the trade deficit in goods has increased under President Biden, not declined, as this claim suggested. It was over $1 trillion in each of his first 3 years in office. It had never hit that level before. I also want to play something else he said on the subject of the economy and the budget. This is something he said about billionaires and tax rates.
We have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what their average tax rate they pay? 8.2%.
Yikes.
I've called this misleading before. It's still misleading. An expert at the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center has told me this number is, quote, way too low. Now, he said the average federal tax rate for billionaires is 8.2%. What he doesn't explain is that that number is not an actual tax rate. What it is an alternative calculation from economists in his own administration that factors in unrealized capital gains that are not actually treated as taxable income under current law. Now, there's nothing wrong with using an alternative figure when you explain it, as the White House does, but Biden himself uses it like it's a tax rate under current law. It's not. So what tax rate do billionaires actually pay? A precise figure is not publicly known at the moment, but a study from two well-known economists estimated that the top 400 households paid an average effective tax rate of 23% in 2018, much higher than the president's number.
All right. So lies. Okay. Misleading, AKA lies. Now, here was a fun headline from Politico. Dems give a thunderous ovation to the president that they dethroned. And that's really what it felt like yesterday. When I was practicing, we used to do a lot of domestic violence cases, and there was a pattern that would emerge, and it's kind of a trope that you'll see even in, Hollywood films and stuff like that. But after a domestically violent event, whoever the abuser happens to be comes back after the abuse and then brings flowers home. Like, wow, what are you making up for? Like, what was so bad underneath? It was the abuse. And that's exactly what this felt like. It's like a bunch of Democrats who just beat the crap out of their spouse, just domestic violence, battered the hell out of Joe to the point that he's basically dead. Like, get out! Your entire 40, 50 years in government is now dead to us. So here, for nearly an hour on Monday night, Joe Biden basked in the applause of the convention goers, even if the adulation was much about his decision to step aside. They're like really thrilled that he's leaving. When his speech finally concluded well past midnight, because they bumped him so late, the 81-year-old embraced Kamala and the role he'd long resisted. He gave the baton to her. He said, I love the job, but I love my country more. Now, they gave him the opening night, which was already like Loserville. He used one of his final opportunities to scream and rant and mumble and slur. He hugged Harris at the end of the speech, cementing his blessing. They threw him out, and the whole thing obviously upended a presidential campaign. But those emotional moments were obscured by a more complicated reality, as some of those were chanting, thank you, Joe, for leaving. Finally, these party divisions were buried beneath a blizzard of we love Joe, all of the turmoil. But because the night fell so far behind schedule, conveniently, what a coincidence, Biden himself didn't take the stage until 11:30 Eastern time. Everybody's in bed, a delay that rankled some of his Democratic allies, obviously. Why didn't they bump him to 1 o'clock? He goes to bed at 8. They told us that. His bedtime is like 8 p.m. And they had him there for a long time. Remember, we were on the show. We played clips of him arriving there in the show. So he was there for a long time, and they just had him, I guess, sitting around, woken up. I mean, it's like treating him like dirt. It's wild. The president, clearly emotional, wiped away tears, introduced by his daughter, says thank you to Kamala, spent much of his time talking about Trump. They did. They spent most of their night talking about Trump. Trump and abortion. It's crazy. It's the abortion party as of now. The night was a mix of elation and relief. Democrats like, oh God, thank God that guy's not our president or our nominee. It's going to be a disaster with him. So they're very thrilled that they threw him out. And there was some commentary about this. So Chris Wallace, who, is a broken clock is right twice a day, as they say, comes out and says the word to describe tonight isn't bittersweet. It's just bitter. Biden got thrown out of a window. He was basically forced out. I think that's almost the exact analogy that we've been using.
The word that everybody is using to describe tonight is bittersweet. It's just bitter. The fact of the matter, I'm not saying Joe Biden is bitter, but, it's like you've been thrown out a window, and as you're falling, you go, gee, it's nice out here. No, he got thrown out of a window, and basically he was forced. There's going to be a lot of talk tonight about how generous it was of him and selfless of him. He was basically forced out by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries.
They did. They threw him out. It was an insurrection of his presidency. He had already secured the nomination, the votes needed for the nomination, and they did not like that. And so Pelosi got asked about this, and she was the Brutus in this whole affair. And here is the conversation between her and Jake Tapper, and she's irritated. She's like, why are we even talking about this, okay?
Aside, and I know that it was very difficult for him. That's been made very clear by some of his top aides like Anita Dunn and Ron Klain. And there does seem to be, even though Anita Dunn said earlier today, quote, nobody wants to have a fight with Nancy Pelosi at this time, unquote, it does seem like there's some residual bad blood or resentment. And I'm wondering if you've spoken to him and what your response is to that.
Sometimes you just have to take a punch for the children.
And that's what you're doing right now? You're just going to take the punch for the children?
Who's punching right now?
I don't know.
Anita Dunn said...
I didn't hear this.
Yeah,
I'm just hearing...
It was an interview with me.
Maybe he's throwing the punch. I don't know.
No.
I'm not. I would never. But
she said she doesn't want to fight.
Nobody wants to have a fight with Nancy Pelosi at this time.
Well, you know what?
Have you talked to him? Is my only question.
What I have to do.
Right.
He made the decision for the country. My concern was not about the president. It was about his campaign. As he has seen exuberance, the excitement that has come forth in our country. I just did an event for one of our members in Illinois, Eric Sorensen, today. Immediately, he got 1,100 volunteers into his campaign as soon as that announcement was
Nobody
made.
is questioning the fact that the Democratic Party seems much better positioned right now than it did 4 weeks and 2 days ago. There's no question about that. Former Speaker Pelosi...
So why are we even talking about it?
They put it on my script and they made me read it. They're holding my cat hostage.
Oh my gosh. They put it on my script and they're holding my cat hostage. I know it's like a joke, I guess. All right, now here is Booty. He came over and hopped on with Fox, and this guy, Lawrence Jones, laced back into him. He says, you know, very strange. We were observing this yesterday, that there was total cleanup, ultimately, of the protesters around the area where the DNC is being held in Chicago. And we jumped in on that segment. I think it was from Fox Live Now or NBC Live Now, whatever it was. And they were explaining that the police came in as soon as they breached a little perimeter. Boom, they're all gone. The news lady was walking around. It's empty. There's no, as far as I can see, just little signs on the ground. Like, wow, they really mopped them up. Not even playing around this year. So what's going on? How come that happened? What happened to all this free speech stuff? Summer of love, peaceful protest, right to participate in American democracy.
Respect to you, Mr. Secretary, the people that are being killed in places all over the country, they look like me, they don't look like you. And they're upset with the Democratic Party not taking it seriously. You guys sent the cavalry in.
Not taking it seriously.
Hold on, let me finish. Well, you guys sent the cavalry in for you guys, for your protection.
Yeah.
But the people of Chicago don't see that on a day-to-day basis.
No.
What are you guys going to do to stop the bloodshed in our community?
Well, first of all, I was mayor of a city that faced that kind of pain. The toughest part of the job was dealing with gun violence, and the most heartbreaking part of the job was comforting or trying to comfort mothers who just wanted their child back. And the big question, I think, for politics, for policy, for media, is who is going to help them versus who is going to use them. The questions she's asking are the exact question any citizen should be asking, which is when you take office.
What do you mean?
Are you going to
Are you
keep your
saying that
promises?
mother is being used?
I'm saying that mother is asking the exact right question.
Okay, so that is what we saw from the DNC. Now, Trump was out reacting to a lot of this. This was an interesting one. Democrats only talked about Trump during their DNC night one. They didn't have any vision for the country. This came out from Trump's posts saying that Democrats have no vision or solutions for the country at all. Nothing for our nation's problems. Last night's convention was solely focused on President Trump. Mentions last night: crime, 6 times. Prices, 5 times. Inflation, 3 times. Economy, 27. Oh, that's pretty good. Border, 8 times. Trump, 147 times. Repeatedly. It's all they can think about. They've got Trump on the brain. They're not actually interested in other things or other solutions. Now, Kamala, you can understand why she doesn't want to talk about those things, because those are pretty bad for her. Border, failed on that one. Economy, not looking good. Inflation, through the roof. Prices, up. Crime, bad. So it's now all about Trump. Why they prosecuted him, they tried to remove him from the ballot and to remove him from this earth. Trump came out, responded to this, says, you know, the DNC and Joe Biden's speech was an angry and ranting speech full of lies. Biden took credit for everything done during the Trump administration, even continuing to say that he was better on inflation and jobs. He never mentioned the Afghanistan disaster and all the wars he got us into, or the fact that far more people died from COVID during Biden and the Biden years than the Trump years, and they had the jab. Jobs Biden-Harris created, quote, were almost 100% from illegal aliens and part-time jobs pouring into our country, which are destroying the lives of Black and Hispanic populations, from Trump. And he had a part 2 on this talking about Kamala. While this was happening night 1 of the DNC, Comrade Kamala decided that she is gonna bail out of the Fox News debate because she can only show up on ABC with George Slopadopoulos. Trump will show up with George Slopadopoulos, but Kamala won't come on with Fox? Pathetic. Totally cowardly. Comrade Kamala Harris just informed us that she will not do the Fox News debate on September 4th. Pathetic. Trump says, I am not surprised by this development because I feel that she knows it is very difficult, at best, for her to defend her record-setting flip-flopping on absolutely everything she once believed in, including her statements that there will be no fracking in Pennsylvania, and her horrible performance on our border and our borders are, where millions of criminals and people from mental institutions and terrorists have been allowed to pour into our country totally unchecked and unvetted. It's called, and she loves it, an open border. Rather than the debate on September 4th, I've agreed to do a teletown hall anchored by Sean Hannity for Fox. It will take place in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Details to follow. Lame. 3 debates, I think, for presidents is totally appropriate. Trump agreed to do one on ultra-lib Slopadopoulos network that's going to be absolutely rigged. If you look into the anchors and the people who are going to be hosting this thing, I think they're like compatriots with Comrade Kamala, and I'm sure it's going to be stacked against him. But again, this is the 3rd act. Trump is now Batman, racing into the flames. So Trump was also out speaking about this. Here is a little bit about what he said from CBS this morning, saying they cooed Joe right out of here to replace him with Kamala.
Former President Donald Trump is 20 touring battleground states during the DNC. He spoke exclusively in Pennsylvania yesterday to our Caitlin Huey-Burns and slammed Democrats over President Biden's decision to step aside.
They took a man who won and they said, get out of here, Joe. This is a coup. And if you don't get out the nice way, we're going to get you out the bad way. Get out of here, Joe. It was a terrible thing they did. And then they put him on Monday night. You know what that's called? That's called like the worst night, okay?
And then they delayed it all the way until almost midnight on the East Coast. Pathetic. Now, the reason why people are so happy Joe is gone is because everything he's said he's accomplished is fake and everything is mostly terrible. So Yahoo Finance over from Bloomberg, they tell us that, very curiously, they're going to revise down those jobs reports, you know, that they came out and bragged about every time. Oh, jobs are up, jobs are up. Well, wrong. It's likely far less robust than initially estimated, okay? Not like a little bit, by 1 million jobs, all right? Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo economists expect that the government's preliminary benchmark revisions on Wednesday, their revisions, to show payrolls growth was at least 600,000 weaker than currently estimated, about 50,000 a month. And while JP Morgan Chase and others see a decline of about 360, Goldman Sachs indicates it could be as large as 1 million. Not actually real. It's just fake, man. They just keep coming out with fake stuff. There are a number of caveats in this figure, but a downward revision to employment of more than 501,000 would be the largest in 15 years and suggests that the labor market may have been cooling for longer and perhaps even more so. The final numbers are due early next year, but they can't really tell the truth on this because they need these numbers to look good for their fake election. Such figures also have the potential of shaping the tone of Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, and other things. And so they come out with fake numbers. They use them to prop up their fake candidates and then revise them later down the line. Now, it costs us all money, all these regulations. This is an interesting research excerpt. This comes from May Mailman. She says, brutal, all right? This University of Chicago professor finds that the Biden-Harris regulations cost the average family 50 grand in bill costs, outpacing even Obama. Trump saved families almost 11 grand in regulatory costs alone. Biden-Harris regulations cost us all 50 grand. I totally believe that because those costs get passed down to us, right? A lot of, I think, because of increased regulations, which cause increased expenses that get passed down to the ultimate end consumer, which is us in many cases. So it's very expensive. Consequences are severe, and people recognize that. Now, the AstroTurf of the Kamala campaign is starting to be revealed. Even this person from a Harris super PAC is saying that public polls are way too optimistic, all right? Saying that the founder of a main outside spending group backing Kamala says that their own opinion polling is, quote, less rosy than public polls suggests, and warned Democrats it's a lot closer in key state races. I'm not saying that we should be complacent here in any way. In fact, we should be more animated and excited than ever. But Chauncey McLean, president of Future Forward, a super political action committee or super PAC that raised hundreds of millions for Kamala, spoke on Monday, says, our numbers are much less rosy than what we're seeing in public. Now, she's strongly favored ahead, reshaped a race that was strongly favored for Trump. Future Forward has created a massive polling operation, tested some 500 digital ads. They've talked to some 375,000 Americans. They've got $250 million to spend. Whew. Super PACs can raise unlimited amounts of money, and she's got multiple paths now. So it's tight, man. It's going to be a tight race, and I don't doubt that for a minute. So it's got to be too big to rig, so we've got to come out in spades. Now, one way that this could happen, theoretically, would be if RFK Jr. dropped out and endorsed Trump and joined forces with Trump as the director of Health and Human Services, in charge of the CDC, FDA, all of those agencies. That would be a nice pickup. Here is RFK Jr.'s vice presidential nominee telling us that there's a couple things we can do here as this election moves forward. If we're not going to win, where do we go to best make an impact?
What my gut tells me right now is that we just have to keep being honest. I got to just keep being honest. I got to keep focusing on what matters the most outside of party lines. I need to focus on a vision that goes beyond November. And if that means that we stay in, and, you know, there's benefits to staying in. If we get over 5% of the vote, we actually establish ourselves as a party. 71% of Americans want a strong third party with a real shot at winning. There's even public funds available if we get over 5% of the vote. So we could get, I think it's like $13.5 million in public funds to keep the party going. That's worth something. That means that we can position for for a real third party election in 2028 where we don't have to go around and spend tens of millions of dollars on ballot access, which means that we can spend all of that time and money campaigning. So, there's two options that we're looking at. And one is staying in, forming that new party, but we run the risk of a Kamala Harris and Waltz presidency because we draw votes from Trump, or we draw somehow more votes from Trump, or we walk away right now and join forces with Donald Trump. And we walk away from that and we explain to our base why we're making this decision. Not easy. Not an easy decision.
Do it. The right thing to do. Join forces with Trump, Director of Health and Human Services. All right? I like it. Hopefully that happens. It would be good.